TDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards that I just don't see anymore in the format. These are all cards that used to be powerhouses. They were everywhere when I first started playing. Still really good, but they've just sort of disappeared. I just almost never see them. I just think it's interesting. A few of these I have mentioned recently, and I just, I talk about them and then I think, honestly, I don't think I've seen that card in a long, long time. For me, when I talk about cards that I don't really see ever, I do mention that a lot. Cards that I think are good that I never see. I play online mostly, especially for the last year or so. I've played exclusively online. I play with people all over the world, Brazil, Germany, China, Japan, whatever. So that's the cross section that I'm dealing with when I talk about what I see and what I don't see. Obviously, if you have your play group or your LGS that you're constantly playing at, and there's a guy or a couple of guys that play certain cards, you're going to see them all the time and you're going to be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? I see that card always. Obviously, if you're in a certain play group that has that card, you are going to see it a lot. I'm just talking about, for me, these are cards that I never see anymore. And I do play online where I'm playing with people all over the place and they just seem to have disappeared. So coming in at number 10, Bribery. 5 mana sorcery. Search target opponent's library for a creature card. Put it onto the battlefield under your control. Man, this card used to get played a lot. I probably every other game I would see this card. People just loved casting Bribery and go getting some, Blightsteel Colossus or Vorinclex or some busted creature out of their opponent's library and going, haha, that's mine now. Like, it's great value. You're paying 5 mana for a Vorinclex, great value, but also it's sort of that, haha, I get it instead of you. And people like kind of stuff like that in Commander. Yeah, I haven't seen Bribery in a Commander game over a year for sure. I can just never see it anymore. Coming in at number 9, Insurrection. 8 mana, 5 red, red, red. Untap all creatures and gain control of them until end of turn they gain haste. So this was one of the main win cons in the format when I first started playing. Again, I saw it all the time. It got printed in the first Commander set, reprinted, right? It existed before, but it got reprinted in the first Commander set. Lots of people were using it in Commander as a win con. And so they reprinted it and it got used lots and has just completely disappeared. I haven't seen anyone cast an Insurrection in a Commander game in at least 2 years, maybe longer. It's been a long time. Another one that was everywhere that I never see anymore is Rise of the Dark Realms. This was another sort of big splashy win con that people would use all the time. 9 mana, right? 7 black, black. Put all creature cards from all graveyards under the battlefield under your control, right? This would be, people just loved casting this spell late in the game. These spells, Rise of the Dark Realms and Insurrection, yeah, they cost lots, but you want to cast them way later in the game when they're actually good and they're actually going to, take advantage of the fact that there's lots of cards in play or lots of creature cards in the graveyard. And yeah, this is just another win con that a lot of people would use, especially in mono black decks. Haven't seen it in years. Coming in at number 7, Tooth and Nail. Again, this is another one this was sort of the go-to, like a win con for green decks. These last 3 cards were basically huge win cons in the format that you saw all the time. You would barely go a game without seeing one of them. So you would always cast this for, it's Entwine, obviously, right? And you would search your library for 2 creature cards. You could just search for 2 creature cards, reveal them, and put them in your hand, or you could put 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield, but you would entwine it, so it would essentially cost 9 mana, right? So 7 colorless, a green and a green. And then you would just go put any 2 creature cards from your library into play. There was a lot of combos that you could just win the game with. Sometimes you would just get a couple of really big, maybe you would get a Craterhoof Behemoth and an Avenger of Zendikar or something. I don't know. But this was one of those cards that, it won the game so often that people would cast it and people would just go, see ya, I'm gone. Just like with Expropriate. I don't know. Maybe Expropriate got printed and sort of people went to that card and pushed a lot of these other ones out. I don't know. But it was a lot like Expropriate, where someone would just cast it entwined and people would just go, okay, see ya, scoop, I'm gone. Even if it didn't mean they were going to win the game, they were going to get so much value out of it that it didn't really matter. Genesis Wave was another one, right? Number 6, 3 green and X. And you reveal the top X cards of your library and you put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. So this is creatures, lands, enchantments, artifacts, right? This is another one that it doesn't actually win you the game, but people would cast it for 10 or 12 and you would get so much out of it that people would just be like, okay, I'm done. See ya. It was essentially a win con in green. Just really don't see it that much anymore in the format. And I know people will probably, with some of these, especially this one, people go, you're crazy. I see that card all the time. I don't. I haven't seen, I think I've seen Genesis Wave cast maybe twice in the last 2 years. I think a lot of people maybe move towards, why don't I just cast a Crater Hoof and win the game? Because Genesis Wave doesn't actually win you the game. It just gets you a lot of stuff, and maybe really isn't even as good as people think that it is. I think a lot of times you would just value someone out of the game because you would get a lot of lands and stuff with it. Just don't really see it that much anymore. Coming in at number 5, Blatant Thievery. A 7 mana, 4 blue, blue, blue. For each opponent, gain control of target permanent that player controls. So this is a card obviously first printed in Onslaught and was terrible because if you have one opponent, paying 7 mana to steal one thing is terrible. But very quickly, people realized that this was fantastic in Commander because you could steal 3 things, right? One from each opponent. You could steal their best thing. A lot of times it was their commander. People would just use this to steal someone's commander. In fact, you could even be real nasty and just steal all your opponent's commanders. So this gained popularity really, really quickly in the format because it was just one of those cards. And again, it was like an auto include in a blue deck. If you're playing a blue deck, this was an auto include. It was reprinted in Commander 2015 for that reason because everyone started using it in the format. Haven't seen it in years. Again, another situation where I think Expropriate is just straight up better, so people stop playing it. Expropriate essentially is a Blatant Thievery and a Time Warp stapled together, which is just ridiculous. That spell is just crazy. So I think that maybe this is a situation of power creep where if you were playing Blatant Thievery, you just replaced it with Expropriate because it's just straight up better. Coming in at number 4, Praetors Council. 8 mana, 5 green, green, green. By the way, you'll notice that all of these, pretty much all of these are really expensive. I think there's maybe something to be said for that. Return all cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Praetors Council. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So this is one that I just did my Hand Size Matters patron deck a little while ago, and I mentioned this card because it's great in that deck, and I thought, you know what? When I mentioned it, I thought, man, I haven't seen this card in forever. You know, a lot of the cards on this list are cards that I mention them, and then I think, you know what? I don't think I've seen someone cast the Praetors Council in like over a year. Praetors Council used to be a card that was an auto-include in mono green decks. It's fantastic. I see it once in a while, but very rare that I see this in a Commander game anymore. A lot of these cards, you'll see them get a reprint in Commander like 2013, 2014, 2015 because they were being used a lot in that time. And then they don't get reprinted because they sort of waned in popularity, right? Another card that has waned heavily in popularity, Consecrated Sphinx. You know, one of my first videos I ever did on this channel, I talked about how I don't put Consecrated Sphinx in my decks because it was so ubiquitous when I first started playing in the format. Everybody was putting in this. If you had blue in your deck, you put Consecrated Sphinx in there because it was just so good. If this stuck on the table, even for one turn cycle, you would draw 6 cards off of it. Just the value was insane. I haven't seen this in a game in forever. Again, this is another card that I put in my Hand Size Matters deck because it just does fit really well. For me, that's the first deck I've ever put it in because I just hated this card so much because it was so ubiquitous in the format when I first started playing it that I avoided it for that reason. And man, I when I put it in that deck, I was just thinking, nobody plays this anymore. I haven't seen it in years. Really, I don't think I've seen this card in a Commander game in probably 2 years. And the last 2 on this list are Commanders. You know, I thought maybe I'll make a list with just the Commanders I don't see anymore, but I didn't really want to make a whole list of that. I think it would be interesting just to add a couple of Commanders on this list that I used to see all the time and never do anymore. So number 2 is Omnath, Locus of Rage. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are like, I have an Omnath Locus of Rage deck. I love it. It's fantastic. Okay, I don't see it anymore. I never see it. Again, this is another commander that was all over the place. I swear, when I first started playing, every other game, it seemed like an Omnath Locus of Rage deck was in there. It was just such an easy build around and such a powerful deck that lots and lots of people played it. It was very popular. I want to say it was top 5 in the entire format, okay? At least when I discovered EDH-Rec, and I use EDH-Rec for my statistics and this sort of thing. When I first discovered EDH-Rec, which was a while after I started playing, right? Atraxa was number 1, Marin was number 2, that was all over the place. They're still fairly popular. I think maybe Alora was number 3, and I think Omnath was number 4. He was way up there. He's still the most popular Gruul commander, but he's not even the most popular Omnath anymore. Omnath Locus of the Royal is now more popular than Omnath Locus of Rage. I mean, that's hilarious. He used to be like number 5, and now he's number 77. And coming in at number 1, Uriel the Miss Stalker, again, another commander that was everywhere. When I first started playing, it was the Voltron commander. Voltron decks were a lot more popular back then. They aren't so much anymore. Maybe that's why he's waned in popularity. I never see him. Again, probably every couple of games there'd be a Uriel the Miss Stalker deck. He was really hard to beat, especially when Totem Armor came out. That made him, it made it so that board wipes, he was protected against board wipes. He was super hard to beat. You had to put Arcane Lighthouse in all of your decks. Maybe that's why I started playing Arcane Lighthouse in all of my decks, was because of Uriel. Because if you didn't have it, you were just screwed. He only currently has 747 decks on EDH-Rec, completely fallen off the radar. I don't see him ever. I haven't seen a Uriel the Miss Stalker deck in years. Haven't seen a lot of these cards in years. It's just kind of funny how much, this is kind of a picture of how much the format has changed in the last few years. A lot of it, I'm sure, has to do with power creep. If you just look at the Naya commanders, there's so many, like Gisath, Atla, right? There's just so many Naya commanders that are so much better than Uriel now. It's just kind of funny how things have changed so much. And if you look at this list, I'm sure a lot of people that have been playing Commander for a long time will be like, oh yeah, I haven't seen that card in a long, long time, or that commander in a long, long time. Things have changed a lot, but that is it for today. That is 10 Commander cards that I just don't see anymore. Thanks for tuning in.